me tell you something very clearly. There are moments in life that don't come with warnings, no alarms, no flashing red lights, just words, simple words, but sometimes those words reveal everything. If a man ever says something that makes your heart shrink, if his words make you question your worth, if he jokes about your pain, if he tests your boundaries to see how much disrespect you will tolerate, leave immediately. Your discomfort is not weakness. It is not drama. It is not you being too sensitive. It is information. It is your inner alarm system activating before your mind has gathered enough evidence to build a case. Discomfort is the quiet signal that something is off, something is misaligned, something does not feel safe. Most people are taught to override that signal, to smile through it, to rationalize it, to say, maybe I'm overthinking, but your body does not overthink. Your nervous system does not create tension without a reason. When your chest tightens, when your stomach drops, when your voice hesitates, that is not coincidence. That is awareness. Discomfort often shows up before disrespect becomes obvious. It appears in the tone that feels slightly degrading, in the joke that targets your insecurity, in the comment that subtly tests how much you will tolerate. Nothing dramatic, nothing extreme, just enough to make you question yourself. And the moment you start questioning your own reaction instead of questioning the behavior, you begin betraying your instincts. Your discomfort is a boundary being touched. It is your values brushing against someone else's lack of them. It is the internal resistance that says, this is not aligned with who I am. Weakness would be having no reaction at all. Weakness would be being so disconnected from yourself that nothing registers. But you feel it. That means you are connected. Discomfort is your inner protector. It is the voice that speaks before damage becomes visible. It whispers before it screams. If you ignore the whisper, it grows louder. If you silence it repeatedly, it eventually turns into anxiety, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. Many people confuse discomfort with conflict. They think avoiding discomfort keeps the peace, but suppressing discomfort does not create peace. It creates internal chaos. Every time you dismiss your own reaction to make someone else comfortable, you teach yourself that your feelings are negotiable. They are not. Discomfort is clarity in its earliest form. It is truth without polished language. It is intuition before logic catches up. You may not always have the perfect explanation in the moment. You may not be able to articulate why something feels wrong, but you do not need a courtroom presentation to validate your feelings. Your body already delivered the verdict. There is a difference between fear of growth and discomfort from disrespect. Growth, discomfort stretches you. It challenges you while still feeling safe. Disrespect, discomfort shrinks you. It makes you feel small, unsure, uneasy. Learn to recognize the difference. One expands you, the other erodes you. When someone speaks in a way that unsettles your spirit, pay attention. When a comment lingers in your mind long after it was said, pay attention. When you feel the need to justify someone's behavior to yourself or others, pay attention. Discomfort is rarely random. It is awareness asking you to act. You do not owe anyone the benefit of the doubt at the expense of your inner peace. You do not need multiple incidents to validate your reaction. The first shift in your energy is enough. The first moment you feel smaller than you were 5 minutes ago is enough. Trusting your discomfort is self-respect in action. It is choosing alignment over approval. It is honoring your internal signals instead of outsourcing your judgment to someone else's opinion. Your discomfort is not a flaw in your personality. It is strength in its earliest stage. It is the part of you that refuses to normalize what does not feel right. It is the part of you that recognizes subtle danger before it becomes obvious damage. And when you begin to trust that feeling without apologizing for it, you stop abandoning yourself in rooms where your spirit feels unsafe. Disrespect does not arrive loudly. It rarely begins with something dramatic. It starts small, a dismissive tone, a sarcastic comment disguised as humor, a boundary crossed by accident, a moment where you feel slightly diminished but convince yourself it was nothing serious. That is how patterns begin. The first time someone disrespects you, it is a test. Not always intentional, but a test nonetheless. They are observing your reaction. Will you challenge it? Will you correct it? Or will you swallow it to keep the atmosphere calm? Your response teaches them how to treat you. When disrespect is ignored, it does not disappear. It settles in. It becomes familiar. What once shocked you starts to feel normal. The comment that once made your stomach drop becomes just how they talk. The behavior that once felt unacceptable becomes something you silently manage. That is how a single moment transforms into a pattern. People repeat what is permitted. If someone sees that their sharp words are met with silence, they learn that silence is the cost of their comfort. If they notice that crossing your boundary leads to no consequence, they learn that your boundary is flexible, not because you said it was, but because you proved it was. Disrespect grows in environments where it faces no resistance. It gains confidence each time it goes unchecked. What begins as subtle becomes bold. What begins as occasional becomes frequent. And what begins as verbal can evolve into emotional manipulation. The danger is not just in their behavior, it is in your adaptation. Each time you tolerate what feels wrong, you adjust your expectations, you lower the standard, you tell yourself, it's not that bad. You compare it to worse scenarios to make it seem manageable. You start negotiating with your own dignity. That negotiation is the beginning of self-betrayal. The first instance of disrespect is clarity. It shows you something about the other person's character. It reveals how they handle power, how they handle frustration, how they handle your individuality. When you dismiss that moment, you are not being patient. You are postponing the inevitable pattern. Consistency is built through repetition. If kindness can become a habit, so can disrespect. If appreciation can become routine, so can belittling. Patterns do not form overnight. They form through tolerated repetition. There is also a psychological shift that happens when disrespect is accepted. The person who disrespects you subconsciously registers that there is room to continue. The internal boundary they might have had weakens because there was no pushback. Humans adjust behavior based on feedback. Silence is feedback. Laughter at an inappropriate joke is feedback. Changing the subject instead of addressing the issue is feedback. And the message received is simple: this is allowed. Many people stay quiet because they fear being labeled dramatic or difficult. They prioritize harmony over honesty. But harmony built on swallowed discomfort is fragile. It requires you to continuously shrink to maintain it. When you accept disrespect once, you make it easier to accept it again. The emotional resistance decreases. What once felt shocking starts to feel predictable. Predictability creates familiarity, and familiarity can be mistaken for normalcy. But normal does not mean healthy. A pattern of disrespect slowly reshapes your self-image. You begin to question your worth. You analyze your tone, your reactions, your needs. Instead of evaluating the behavior directed at you, you evaluate yourself. That shift is subtle but powerful. It moves accountability away from the source and places it on you. Respect once compromised is difficult to rebuild without confrontation, and confrontation feels harder after you have already allowed multiple instances to pass. The longer a pattern continues, the more uncomfortable it feels to challenge it. So silence becomes easier than disruption. That is why the first moment matters so much. It sets the precedent. It draws the line. It communicates what is acceptable and what is not. Ignoring it does not preserve peace. It postpones conflict while allowing damage to accumulate. Because once disrespect becomes a pattern, it no longer asks for permission. Control often disguises itself as care. It can sound protective. It can look attentive. It can even feel flattering in the beginning. Someone wanting to know where you are, who you are, with what you are doing. Someone offering advice about how you should dress, speak, behave. At first, it may appear as interest. But love and control are not the same thing. Love gives space. Control restricts it. Love listens. Control dictates. Love respects individuality. Control demands conformity. When someone uses affection as leverage, that is not romance. When approval is given only when you behave a certain way, that is not support. When kindness is withdrawn to punish you, that is not emotional maturity. That is control operating through emotional manipulation. Control thrives on power imbalance. It needs one person to feel slightly smaller, slightly dependent, slightly unsure. It survives when you begin adjusting yourself to maintain someone else's approval. You start monitoring your tone. You hesitate before expressing disagreement. You soften your opinions to avoid tension. Slowly, you begin to shrink. Love does not require shrinking. Control often speaks in ultimatums. If you loved me, you would. You don't need them. You have me. I'm just trying to help you be better. The language may sound persuasive, even logical, but underneath it is a message your autonomy is negotiable. In healthy love, your independence is not a threat. Your friendships are not competition. Your growth is not something to be managed. Control, however, feels threatened by anything it cannot dominate. It isolates, it criticizes, it questions your judgment until you start doubting it yourself. One of the clearest signs of control is the need to win rather than understand. Arguments become about dominance instead of resolution. Apologies become rare because admitting fault weakens control. Accountability is avoided because control requires authority. not equality. Control also rewrites reality. It minimizes your feelings. It reframes hurtful behavior as your overreaction. It turns your boundaries into accusations. You may hear you're too sensitive or you're imagining things. Over time, this erodes your confidence in your own perception. Love does not make you question your sanity. Control keeps you walking on eggshells. You feel relief when things are calm, but tension is always nearby. You measure your words carefully. You anticipate moods. You carry the responsibility of keeping the relationship stable. That is not partnership. That is emotional labor rooted in fear. Fear is a tool of control. If you are afraid to express yourself honestly, that is not love. If you feel anxious about disappointing someone because their reaction might be disproportionate, that is not love. If you must earn basic kindness through compliance, that is not love. Control may occasionally appear passionate. It may be intense, consuming, but intensity is not depth. Possessiveness is not devotion. Jealousy framed as proof of care is still insecurity seeking dominance. Healthy love is steady. It does not need to restrict you to keep you close. It trusts, it communicates. It allows disagreement without punishment. It honors your boundaries without treating them as rejection. Control is rooted in insecurity and fear of losing power. Love is rooted in security and willingness to share power. One suffocates, the other supports. When someone tries to mold you into a version that is easier to manage, that is not affection. When your freedom feels limited in subtle ways, that is not protection. When your voice feels smaller over time, that is not connection. Control is about ownership. Love is about partnership. And when you confuse the two, you risk calling restriction devotion and mistaking emotional captivity for commitment. You are not responsible for fixing someone's behavior. You are not a rehabilitation center for unresolved trauma. You are not a training ground for basic respect, and you are not obligated to sacrifice your emotional stability so someone else can learn lessons they refuse to face. When someone behaves poorly, the instinct to fix it often comes from empathy. You see their potential. You see the version of them they could become. You tell yourself they just need patience, understanding, support. You believe that if you love them correctly, speak gently enough, explain clearly enough, they will change. But change does not come from your effort. It comes from their decision. There is a difference between supporting growth and carrying someone's immaturity on your back. Support is mutual. Fixing is one-sided. Support requires willingness from both people. Fixing usually involves one person overextending while the other remains comfortable. You can communicate your boundaries. You can express how something makes you feel. You can give someone the opportunity to adjust. But you cannot force self-awareness into someone who avoids accountability. You cannot convince someone to value respect if they do not already see its importance. When you take responsibility for someone else's behavior, you begin to internalize their actions. If they lash out, you search for what you did wrong. If they disrespect you, you analyze your tone. If they withdraw affection, you assume you slowly. Their choices become your burden. That weight is not yours to carry. Everyone is responsible for managing their own emotions, their own reactions, their own patterns. Adults are accountable for the way they treat others. Explaining basic decency repeatedly is not your job. Teaching someone not to belittle you is not your assignment. Reminding someone to be kind is not a lifelong duty. When you step into the role of fixer, you unintentionally enable stagnation. If someone knows you will always smooth things over, they have little motivation to change. If they know you will rationalize their behavior, they feel no urgency to confront it. Your tolerance becomes their permission to remain the same. It is not selfish to expect emotional maturity. It is not unrealistic to expect consistency. It is not demanding to expect respect. Lowering your standards to accommodate someone's unwillingness to grow does not make you compassionate. It makes you exhausted. There is also a subtle arrogance in believing you can reshape someone who does not want to reshape themselves. Growth is deeply personal. It requires discomfort, reflection, and intentional effort. You cannot do that internal work for another person. No matter how deeply you care, loving someone does not obligate you to endure their harmful patterns. Understanding their past does not excuse their present behavior. Trauma may explain actions, but it does not justify repeated harm. Compassion does not require self-sacrifice. When you constantly fix, you abandon your own needs. Your energy goes toward managing their moods, anticipating their triggers, preventing their outbursts. You become hyper-aware of their emotional landscape while neglecting your own. Over time, resentment builds quietly. Healthy relationships are built on shared responsibility. Both individuals regulate themselves. Both individuals reflect. Both individuals apologize when necessary. If you are the only one adjusting, the dynamic becomes unbalanced. You can offer love. You can offer honesty. You can offer one clear boundary. What you cannot offer is transformation for someone who refuses to participate in their own growth. And the moment you realize you are working harder on their behavior than they are, you must recognize that you have stepped into a role that was never yours to begin with. Self-respect is more important than attention. Attention can be loud, flattering, intoxicating. It can make you feel seen in moments when you have felt invisible. A message, a compliment, a look across the room, these things can spark validation quickly, but validation is not the same as value. Attention is easy to give. Self-respect is hard to maintain. Anyone can offer you words. Anyone can temporarily focus on you. Attention requires very little character. It does not demand consistency, integrity, or depth. It is often driven by impulse, curiosity, or ego. Self-respect, however, demands boundaries. It demands discipline. It demands the courage to walk away from what feels good in the moment but costs you later. When attention becomes the goal, standards begin to slip. You may ignore red flags because at least you are being noticed. You may tolerate mixed signals because silence feels worse. You may accept crumbs because they are better than nothing. Slowly, the need to feel chosen overshadows the need to be respected. Attention feeds the ego. Self-respect protects the soul. There is a difference between someone who admires you and someone who merely enjoys access to you. Attention can be temporary and self-serving. It often fades when something new appears. Self-respect ensures that when attention fades, your worth does not. If you depend on attention for validation, you hand over control of your confidence to others. Your mood shifts based on responses. Your sense of value rises and falls with how often someone checks in. That is emotional dependency disguised as romance or connection. Self-respect anchors you internally. It says, even if no one claps, I remain valuable. It says, even if someone loses interest, I do not lose myself. It is the quiet decision to choose dignity over temporary excitement. Attention without respect often comes with inconsistency. Warm today, distant tomorrow. Engaged when convenient, unavailable when challenged. It keeps you guessing. It keeps you chasing, and chasing can feel thrilling at first, but it eventually becomes draining. When you prioritize attention, you may begin performing for approval, adjusting your personality, softening your opinions, laughing at jokes that cross your boundaries. You become more concerned with being liked than being authentic. Each compromise seems small, but over time they accumulate. Self-respect requires alignment. It requires saying no when something feels off, even if saying yes would bring you closer to being noticed. It requires walking away from conversations that diminish you, even if staying would keep the spotlight on you. Attention can make you feel temporarily powerful. Self-respect makes you permanently grounded. There will always be people willing to give attention. Not everyone is willing to give respect. Respect involves consistency. It involves honoring boundaries. It involves valuing your time, your energy, your emotions. It is quieter than attention, but far more stable. When you choose attention over self-respect, you teach others that access to you is easy. When you choose self-respect over attention, you teach others that your presence is earned through integrity. It is better to be alone in your dignity than surrounded by admiration that costs you your standards. It is better to be overlooked than overexposed to someone who does not honor your worth, because attention fades, shifts, disappears. And if your identity is built on it, you will constantly feel the need to secure more. But when your foundation is self-respect, you no longer compete for visibility. You no longer beg to be chosen. You no longer confuse being desired with being valued. Walking away the first time your peace is disturbed requires courage that most people never develop. It means trusting the first signal instead of waiting for undeniable proof. It means believing your internal shift before the external damage becomes obvious. Most people wait for something dramatic to justify leaving. They wait for a betrayal, a public humiliation, a breaking point they can explain to others. But peace rarely shatters all at once. It erodes quietly. The first disturbance is subtle. It is the moment your energy changes, the moment you feel slightly tense instead of relaxed, the moment you replay a comment in your mind because something about it did not sit right. That is the signal. That is the moment clarity appears in its earliest form. Peace is not just the absence of conflict. It is the presence of emotional safety. It is the ability to exist without constantly defending yourself. It is speaking freely without fear of backlash. When someone disturbs that environment, even slightly, your system recognizes it before your logic does. Many people ignore the first disruption because they want harmony. They want to give the benefit of the doubt. They want to avoid seeming dramatic. But each time you override your discomfort to maintain connection, you chip away at your own stability. You tell yourself that your inner calm is negotiable. It is not. Walking away early prevents deeper wounds later. The longer you stay in a space that unsettles you, the more normalized the tension becomes. You adjust to it. You call it normal relationship stress or just personality differences. Meanwhile, your nervous system remains on alert. When peace is disturbed repeatedly, you begin to live in anticipation, anticipating tone shifts, anticipating criticism, anticipating mood changes. That anticipation drains you. It turns simple interactions into mental calculations. It transforms connection into caution. The first time your peace is disrupted is the cleanest exit point. There are fewer memories attached, fewer emotional investments, fewer explanations required. Leaving later often means untangling yourself from deeper attachments and more complicated dynamics. Peace is expensive because it requires boundaries. Boundaries require discomfort, and discomfort often invites resistance from others. Some people will not understand why you left so quickly. They may say you overreacted. They may suggest you could have worked through it, but they are not living inside your nervous system. They are not carrying your intuition. You are. Protecting your peace does not mean you avoid all conflict. It means you refuse environments where conflict feels threatening rather than constructive. It means you differentiate between healthy disagreement and subtle disrespect. One challenges ideas. The other challenges your sense of worth. Walking away early also reinforces your self-trust. Each time you honor your first instinct, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. You teach yourself that your calm matters, that your emotional stability is priority, not luxury. Staying where your peace is compromised sends the opposite message. It teaches you to endure, to tolerate, to survive rather than thrive. Survival mode is exhausting. It keeps you hyper-aware, cautious, guarded. Peace allows you to expand. When someone's presence introduces confusion, tension, or unease into your life, pay attention. The body does not lie. The shift in your breathing, the tightness in your shoulders, the hesitation in your voice, these are not random reactions. They are data. And the earlier you respond to that data, the less damage accumulates. The longer you delay, the more complicated leaving becomes. The more you question yourself, the more you rationalize, the more you adapt to discomfort. Walking away the first time your peace is disturbed is not impulsive. It is decisive. It is the refusal to negotiate with inner calm. It is the quiet understanding that protecting your mental and emotional stability is more important than preserving temporary connection. In the end, it was never about one sentence. It was never about one argument, one joke, one moment. It was about what that moment revealed. Discomfort is a signal. Disrespect becomes a pattern. Control is not love. You are not here to fix anyone. Attention is never worth your dignity, and your peace is not negotiable. The first time something feels wrong, that feeling is clarity trying to protect you. The first time your value is questioned, that is information. The first time your spirit feels unsettled, that is awareness waking you up. Strength is not staying and proving you can endure more. Strength is recognizing when enough is enough. Strength is choosing yourself before damage becomes permanent. You do not need dramatic endings to justify walking away. You do not need visible scars to validate your decision. You only need self-respect. Because the moment you start protecting your peace without apology, you stop begging for love and start demanding respect. And the right environment, the right person will never require you to abandon yourself to stay.